Spawn Camp Council presents AM to DM. Kingdawes and Adam2welve bring you Dungeons and Dragons from the Game Master's perspective and rolling insight on players. King, you got your coffee?
Sure do.
Excellent. First topic I want to talk about tonight, because we both are fairly experienced DMs. There are things that people do as players or just in general that irritate you as a DM. One of those things is asking about getting into Dungeons and Dragons. You know, people just think you can just jump into it. They know that you're a DM or they see that you play Dungeons and Dragons and they're just like, oh, okay, well, I'm doing that. Well, that's not exactly how it goes. So take this topic from single player or group player. Starting out with single player, there are ways to get into it if you've got time that you can just study, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
And there's other ways. How would you categorize the best way as a single player?
So the easiest way, if you're just by yourself looking to get into into Dungeons and Dragons, any online site is a great tool to use. D&D Beyond is great. YouTube, just straight up Google. Really what you want to do is learn the core mechanics of the game first. So what I found when I first started, I would sit there and I would just make character sheets over and over and over again. That really helped me get a good understanding of the game. I would sit there and I'd make a character sheet at level 1. I'd level it up to 20. So I would learn how to level up, what I get for spell slots, how to use those spell slots, really get kind of the core mechanics of the game down. And then I went into learning how to, get into the DM side, how to build campaigns. So as a single player, best thing to do is just do dry runs and kind of make characters. And if you have access to any kind of online resource, like I said, D&D Beyond is a great source. That's where you can make characters online as well.
I would agree. I mean, I think that, if you can use your internet resources before buying the PHB, the Player's Handbook, before buying the Dungeon Master's Guide, the DMG, we'll be using those terms later as well. I spell them out like that. Instead of going right into those, because they are very, I guess they're easy to read, but they're not reader friendly. They're more like
textbooky. Yeah.
It's kind of a pain in the ass. But if you've got time and you really know you want to do it, then it's worth it to invest in those. And they're not cheap. I find them on sale every now and then, but what, $60, I think?
$60 in a bookstore. Amazon usually has them for about 40, 35, somewhere in there. So
it gets a little pricey. But that's really, overall, if you know you're going to do it, that's the best way to learn everything you can. And, especially going to be a DM, get your DMG and just, build your little campaign from the ground up. We'll talk about world building in a later episode. But, there's also, if you're in a group and you're sort of getting away from Carcassonne, your table game, or your video game players that play a lot together and you decide you want to do D&D, there's a good way to do that with the starter kit. They have an essentials kit, which is more like a springboard into the textbooks. Right. And you don't really, I don't know, it's okay to have something like that if you want to get do a more deep dive into it without buying the books. But I think that you could just skip that step and go straight to the books if that's what you want. The starter kit has its own dice. You have a little mini campaign you can do. It's pretty easy. The characters are already built out for you. You have little character sheets with everything. You just pick one you want, run your little party, and do the thing just to see if you like it or not.
Yep.
If you are going heavy into it, Monster Manual is a great thing to get. There are a lot of fantastic books out there that have Storm King's Thunder, I guess, has a little level 1 starting.
Any of your little adventure books are good. That you have your core books, if you're going to start with one book, I would go with Player's Handbook. That's just, you need to get that. That's, if you're going to buy a hard copy book, get the Player's Handbook. Next, I would probably jump into a DM guide. And then third, I would go with the Monster Manual if you're really that far into it and you want to build a campaign and everything. But absolutely start with the Player's Handbook. That goes over character building. That goes over each individual class. That goes over game mechanics. So that's the one to get.
Yeah, fantastic. I agree. Do you get irritated by people coming up to you and asking?
No. It's funny that you kind of, it's still, even if it's a little more popular now, it's still something you don't see a lot of people doing. Out and about in the wild, you don't see a whole lot of people talking about Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. A good resource, if you go to a comic book shop or anything like that, A lot of those comic book shops have like a dedicated D&D night, or 2 or 3 times a week. It all varies on how busy it is, and that's a great way to, as a single player or even a group, to approach D&D if you're interested. You can go in there, you can watch people play the actual game. Maybe you can get in and play a session or two. And everybody that I've seen so far in the D&D community has been really receptive to new players, because they really want the whole community to grow. And you're only going to do that by introducing new people.
What do you think about like hiring a DM?
Hiring a DM?
Yeah.
For like what? Like if you're having a little party,
just starting out, and you like want to learn how to play. You think it's worth it to hire a DM to come curate a game for you?
I mean, if you want to do that, sure. I would imagine what you could do is you can jump on like Facebook groups and see if there's someone willing to DM a session for you and your friends. The starter kit that you mentioned, those little adventures that you can do, the level 1 to 5 adventures, are very easy if you're a new DM, like you've never DM'd before, because you can sit there, designate someone to be the DM, and it's all laid out, what options are where and what's behind that door. And so that's a good way to kind of get your feet wet in the DM side.
What about moving on to character creation? You talked about the PHB a bit.
Yeah.
Getting the PHB in character creation, do you think you should stay to like core races and, or what do you think? How deep of a dive do you need to do, and what do you recommend as far as character creation?
What I did, like I said, when I first started D&D, is I sat there and I just made dozens of character sheets. I found out what race and class combinations I liked. What I've learned now that I've been in the Dungeons and Dragons scene for a bit, I tend to go with more flavorful characters than min-maxy characters, because of course you can run an orc barbarian and have your racials match up with the class and kind of go the traditional route. Or what happens if you make that orc a bard? Like, how funny is that going to be to have this giant lumbering orc, but he plays a little piccolo? Like, I'd rather see at the end of the day, D&D is a game, and I'd rather have more fun with it than min-max my character and try and do everything correctly.
Yeah, I think that brings up an important point too. I mean, the whole point of D&D, there's a winning aspect to it, but it's not the DM's job just to kill you all. So it's more of an entertaining dalliance, I guess. So role play is fun in that. You have to be careful; you will get killed. But beyond the winning and the loot grind of it, I mean, it's just the role play and the interaction between players. That's the most important part to me too. Right. I like the flavorful characters as well. So you get a group of people around the table and they pick certain types of characters. What is your least favorite type, whether it be min-maxing or flavorful, or least type of character, or least type of group, least favorite group?
I can answer that. Overall, least favorite character, fucking psionics. I hate them. Don't play with psionic. They're the worst for a DM. They're so broken right now. They're just not fun to play with.
No.
As a character, as a player character, what I like to not see are the power gamers. The ones that min-max their characters. They're the ones that try and find the little loopholes in the rules to game the game. Not a big fan of that. Just, it puts the spotlight on you. Yes, you're having fun, but everybody else involved is not having fun, because either you're taking up all the time, or you're so overpowered that the DM has to ratchet up the difficulty for the encounter, and then their characters start to suffer. So it's the power gamers that kind of ruin it for everybody.
They definitely do. I'd recommend them. If you're in power gamers, everybody needs to be power gamers. Yep. Help your DM out. If you're running flavorful characters, I mean, that just can be droning too. If you've got so much role play going on that nobody's ever getting anything done, they're all just sitting in a bar talking about their day.
Right.
That's boring as hell. You got to find a balance in between that. And I would have to agree with the min-maxers. That's my least favorite type of player.
Yeah.
Or the rule lawyers. That'll be like, no, wait, page 76 of the PHB says.
Right.
Yeah.
Article 2, Section B.
And somebody watching this right now knows exactly what page 76 of the PHB says. So, yeah, I can't stand it. Just let it slide.
Well, one of the more fun parts as a DM, like what I've found, is the interpretation of the rules. I know playing in a lot of your sessions, as a player character, if your DM likes what you're doing, you can kind of bend the rules. I'm not going to let you break the rules, but if you want to flourish a little bit and make the session more fun for everyone through thematic storytelling, I'm more likely to let you, flap your arms as a dwarf and actually fly across the crevasse than if you roll well. If you roll 3 nat 20s and flourish the hell out of it, sure. Yeah. But that comes from experience as a DM too, as to where you can kind of bend those rules and maybe fudge a roll or get a crit or this and that. So a little delicate line there.
Yeah. We've done when we played together and I DM'd, we did I believe it was you one time, did you wanted to attack somebody in surprise attack, and it was like, obviously that you couldn't do that. And it was like, well, what if I jumped behind this wall or jumped off the wall, try to hit that chair, and then land behind him to strike? With that, it's like, okay, well,
go for it.
Yeah. So yeah, roll an athletics check, see if you can hit the wall, if you can land the land, bounce off the table, whatever it is, and then land behind, and then we'll see if the monster can can find you or not,
right?
And allow it. Because, stuff like that makes the game fun.
That's the memorable stuff, too. Like, no one cares that your monk did 45 attacks, all crit half of them. So, but they do care that the same monk swung off a chandelier, it dropped down and encapsulated the monster. The wizard then cast an icy spray underneath him. They slipped. The barbarian came up and stuffed his axe into his head. Like, that stuff. Yeah, would be memorable as a player character.
And as a DM, you can kind of hint towards that. It's hard to push it, but you can kind of sort of it's not working very well. You guys need maybe a different way of doing this,
right? And that's kind of limited to your players' creativity.
Yeah,
and so you see that more with experienced players, but new characters, new player characters. What you should look out for, that Adam harps on a lot with his campaigns, is environmental objects. Everybody forgets that you're in a world. Granted, it's spoken word, or there could be minis, but in the thematic setting, there's going to be tables around. There are going to be torches on the wall. There are going to be rocks on the ground or sand, and you got to use all that. And you'll have a lot more fun if you, instead of just I attack now, I do a bonus action, I then move. Instead of that, flourish it a little bit and, kick sand up into the person's eye, then attack. It makes it so much more fun for you as a character than just the monotonous kind of slog through the dungeon.
Yeah. Another thing is the skill checks. A lot of people just kind of forget that skill checks exist. Yeah. And, even in combat, you could run certain skill checks to see if you can just sort of change the path of the encounter.
Oh, yeah.
Or some of the best times I've ever had DMing.
Oh, yeah. It takes one persuasion check to avoid a whole fight or an intimidation. And then you just became friends with the guard or intimidated him, and then you just got into the castle without spending a bunch of your hit points and spell slots. And so, as you're fighting, you see a fungus on the ground, you use your nature check, turns out to be a poisonous fungus, you throw that at the enemy. Lots of stuff that you can do. And a lot of people do forget about those skills. There's a ton. There's 20 skills there that nobody really seems to pay attention to.
And as a player, sometimes you can prod your DM in that way too. It's like, is there anything in the environment that's around me that I could use to maybe create a poison tipped arrow or anything like that? You could say those things out loud, and the DM never had any intention of doing that.
Nope.
But because you asked it and you sort of sparked that little, that intuition in the DM, they can sort of run with that, and be like, oh yeah, you know what? Now that you looked around, you did see some fungus growing on the wall.
As a DM, what I've noticed is like I have how I think the session's going to go. Never happens.
No.
The players do something, and I'm making shit up on the spot as they travel down that completely different path than where we were. Yeah, so,
and you have to be able to.
Sometimes DMs need a little inspiration too from the player characters to keep those juices going and keep that story flowing forward.
And that's an important point: is that you're all in this together. The DM's having fun being a DM, and you guys are having fun being a player. So you have to sort of bolster that, and and play off of each other too, instead of just expect to be taken along and
a story told to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're part of the story.
You are indeed. That brings me your flavorful characters, like you said, the ones that flourish and bounce off of things. That is my favorite. So, best party mix. You think that all same characters is a bad idea? I always do.
I don't like all same character parties. It could be min-maxy where you have 2 tanks and a healer. You can plow through a dungeon or something. I like to see the traditional RPG, tank, healer, DPS, just to cover your bases. That's always good. But D&D has so many classes that you can really mix and match kind of, you can have a bard who's not only support, but can also heal. He can not only buff, but he can also debuff the enemy. You can have a cleric who can not only tank, but he can also heal. So there's a lot of roles that are filled. And the best thing to do is really get with your group beforehand and kind of get a good coverage base. There are some people that find melee characters easier than spellcasters because you don't really have to keep track of spell slots and everything. But then there are some people who only play casters just for the sheer power of them. So it really helps to get your group synergy together. You are going to want to have at least some kind of structure of that kind of tank, healer, DPS. Right. That's really important if you're adventuring. And it also depends on the campaign, too. If it's a role-play heavy campaign, and your DM should communicate that beforehand. If it's a role-play heavy campaign, then 4 bards, who cares? Yeah, whatever. Right. 3 sorcerers, three illusion wizards, it's who cares at that point. But if it's combat oriented, if there's any combat, you're going to want that traditional kind of mix.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my least favorite would be, a lot of the same repetitive type characters, or you gotta say a group that doesn't bring a healer of any kind.
Oh, it's tough. Because what do you do as a DM?
Yeah.
You have to give them short rests all the time, or you have to tone down your damage. Yeah, it's tough.
And then you got to hint towards getting potions, like they go into
There's a shop nearby.
There's a shop that says potions on top of it. Yeah.
It's like a sign with a potion.
Al's All Hill Emporium.
Yeah. So, that's tough because and that kind of goes along with, how strict you are as a DM. And you can certainly die in Dungeons and Dragons pretty quickly, especially low level characters. Like my warlock I just made has 12 hit points, and most low level stuff can do 12 hit points of damage in 2-3 turns. Yeah. So if you don't have a healer on board, you're gonna die pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite has to be the group that has. I love seeing a rogue and a ranger paired. Mm-hmm. I like seeing that synergy. Fighter, of course, healer is always great to have in there. Definitely healer. But having like somebody that's going to get in there and sneak around and do some really cool stuff, especially in the role-playing part of it, or like information finding.
Yeah.
And then having a ranger who's just, popping from the shadows, using that to sort of like do distance attacks and things.
Right. What's your least favorite class you've DM'd for or played with so far?
I hate barbarians.
I was just going to say that. I can't stand them.
I can't stand them at all, man. They're the worst.
I don't like how they are.
No. It's like, I'll go back and rage. Okay, cool. I'm going back and rage again. Yeah. I'm going
to rage. I'm going to attack twice, and I'm going to rage again.
Yeah. It's like, okay.
It just doesn't do it for me. It's the least flavorful class, I believe, in the game.
Yeah.
At least with a fighter, you can have your martial archetypes, and there are ways around that. You can go totem warrior, totem barbarians, and kind of flavor those up. But the traditional barbarian is just boring. I rage, I attack, rage again. It's so boring.
It really is. At least I haven't DM'd a Warforged yet, so I imagine that's pretty boring as well. But but definitely barbarians right at the top of the list of the crappiest ones ever. I think we kind of answered this one already. The third topic tonight was, or today, this morning, role play versus min max. Got into that. Let's see. How about locale? What would you say about what kind of locations do you like DMing? What are your least favorites?
So what I've found, my favorite kind of locales are really anything that gives options to the player. I can say my least favorite are dungeon crawls, sewers, anywhere very linear. It just it's not very fun. I want to have the players go, and if they travel this way, I can have this happen. If they go this way, something else can happen. But with a dungeon crawl, it really kind of limits you to next room, next room, next room, next room. Not a whole lot of option for any kind of excitement.
Yeah, I agree. What would be your absolute least favorite locale, like specifically like wilderness, swamp?
Oh, absolute least favorite would be probably like a cave or a sewer. Hate them.
That's funny.
Yeah, my favorite. I love aquatic campaigns. They're great because not only does it give you a variety of monsters you can use, but it also gives you the, once you're underwater, everything changes. Everything that is aquatic now is much more powerful. Everything that is non-aquatic now has to worry about holding their breath, now has to worry about movement speed decrease. So it changes very quickly the dynamic of the game.
Yeah. I always like to have a setting where it's there's availability of other creatures around you, just randomly. Wilderness is great. Aquatic, like you said, fantastic. There's a lot of cool rules for aquatic too, which makes things a lot of fun. Now, not for the beginning player.
No.
I've found that one of the worst things is putting new players in an aquatic setting.
Yeah, and introducing a kraken.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Well, shit turns up, everybody falls. Yeah.
It happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you're falling in an upturned ship at a high rate of speed. There are things falling
towards you. You landed in
Trask's
belly. What the fuck? That was a fun moment. That was a fun campaign moment right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the, like you said, the ability to introduce like a surprise creature. Wilderness was great. Like when you introduce those bugbears, dragons can fly up over the canopy. It's something that you can always kind of throw an additional flavor in there.
Yeah, I like it. It wows your players to the point where you're like, what the hell was that?
Right.
It's like, well, you didn't get to see
it.
Well,
and also in a kind of wilderness, you get a ton of cover for your rangers and your rogues. It breaks line of sight, so you give your PCs something where they can position themselves out of line of sight of the enemy caster. So it definitely helps. That's a good one.
I found that better with cover too. That if you go into somewhere like that, people know what trees do. It's pretty obvious. I can get behind a tree or I can hide in a bush. You go into a tavern, you can toss over a table. You can use that as cover, but nobody thinks to we're in here in this room. There are any tables in here. Well, let's turn it over.
Keg towards the bad guys or any of that stuff.
Players just don't perceive that, and I've made that mistake just going into places like that.
Into combat, and you start to lose sight of what's around you. But in a forest, there's a tree right next to you. Yep, pop behind it. Now you have full cover.
Yeah, that makes it easier. My least favorite, in the dungeon crawling game that is Dungeons and Dragons are dungeons. I hate caves and I hate sewers, just like you talked about. I mean, you're so limited in those adventures, and and they're going to be traps. It's just so rote and basic that it's just boring. It's boring to put people in those situations. I mean, I guess you need to get people used to their skills and skill checks, and oh, you got shot with a dart. Didn't think to look at the door.
Right. There's a pressure plate there.
Yep. It's like
the most fun. The most fun I've had in any kind of dungeon crawl, I'm sure you remember that the trials I made, each room was a different puzzle that you had to do. That was the most fun I had in any kind of dungeon setting. Each room was a different puzzle that I had created or looked up, and the player characters had to interact in a certain way to go on to the next room. And it really made people, my whole goal in that was to really make people get away from the combat side and use their brain more, overcome these puzzles and use their skills to overcome these puzzles, because we hadn't, as in that group that we were using, it was very monotonous from previous sessions of combat, and people weren't, it's fine if you're going to do a combat campaign, but spice it up a little bit. And that wasn't, a DM fault. That was kind of lack of creativity from player side, but I just wanted to throw that puzzle one in there, and I think it changed pace really easily.
I think that's where the top tier of DMing too. And if you can create fun puzzles, things that challenge people to think, but aren't too terribly exhaustive for the player, that they can figure it out. And I mean, that's the perfect campaign to me. We can have a little bit of that mixed in with some fighting too, especially if the puzzle's failure leads to fighting.
Right.
Something like that. That's always fun.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. How about sandbox or linear campaign?
So with newer players, I like linear campaigns. I don't want them to have too many options to veer off, and then we have no end in sight. If I'm playing with more advanced players, I'm fine with sandbox because I can give them an end goal, and they'll get there. It might not be the path that I decided to go down, and that was my ideal path, but they'll get there eventually and maybe visit a different town and then end up towards the bad guy at the end. But as newer characters, I want to have kind of milestones in place to move them along.
Yeah. That's probably the smartest way to do it. Me, I'm sandbox all day. If I'm going to do a linear campaign, I prefer to just do a book, or do a pre-made adventure that I can get it from a DMs Guild. But sandbox to me, I mean, it's tougher. You have to do, severe world building. You got to be able to move on the fly, just throw encounters that make sense based on terrain or whatever they decide to do. But that's the most fun as a DM for me, to be able to have that just open world where people can decide what to do. Definitely have a pivotal, point. You got a bad guy. This is what's going on around you. You need to make your way toward X spot. But then having them just find their own way to there. Is there a town around? Well, why don't you ask somebody that you see? And then, oh, yeah, there is a town. And I'm quickly scribing down, this town's name is...
what was the name of that town? I put it somewhere.
Yeah, it's fun. Fun stuff, man. But yeah, linear campaigns, I think, are definitely easier. And they do better for new players, novice players. But they're just not as fun to me. I prefer sandbox.
Right.
How you feeling? You ready to wrap this up for the morning? Get back to...
I think it's time to wrap it up for now.
Okay. All right, I'm feeling the same. Got to get back to checking out the kid. All right, everybody. This has been our first episode of AM to DM. Thank you all for watching and listening. And we'll see you soon for sure. That's it for this episode. Join us next time for the best and worst of D&D. Have a great morning, everyone. We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.